Here we are again, Sanjay, episode 6, season 1. We've made it.
We got there. I can't believe we've got there. It's been tiring, exciting, and lots of fun. It's been lots of fun.
It's been great. Listen, we've said this before, but it very much feels like a startup journey. This, we came up with this idea a while ago, jotted a few thoughts down on a piece of paper, to emerge with 6 episodes and some really fascinating interviews, wonderful quiz guests, and we've been around the world with various cities. It feels like we've really achieved something, and I think the feedback we're getting is very positive. So thank you everybody who has listened, who's subscribed, and we hope you enjoy what is going to be a slightly different episode 6. We're finishing with a slightly different twist to certainly 2 of the sections, and we've also got a really hot quiz ahead for you as well, with 2 tech leaders based in the UK. But Sanjay, first, you'll remember back in episode 4 that we came up with a rather cheeky things that a CTO should never say to their CEO. Do you recollect?
I remember.
Extremely popular with CTOs, if not CEOs. So we put the boot back on the other foot. So we put out a little survey and we asked, what are the things that a CEO is unlikely to say to their CTO? And we came up with a whole long list, and I'm going to give you my top 5. Are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
We've got a drum roll in the background from producer James. So here we go. This is not necessarily in any particular order, although I do quite like the last one, probably more than any others. Here we go. 5 things that the CEO is unlikely to ever say to their CTO. Number 1, obviously that idea was yours. Number 2, we have so much in common. Number 3, why don't you take a couple of extra weeks to deliver that? Number 4, no, really, you're great at small talk. And number 5 or number 1, whichever way you want to take this list, Sanjay, your software costs have come under budget. There you are. What do you think of that, Sanjay?
My personal favourite is the one right in the middle, which is take a couple of extra weeks. I'm looking forward to the day that I get told that. I really am.
That your CEO says that. Yeah, as I say, those things are highly unlikely to ever be uttered by a CEO to the CTO. But anyway, special edition, lots to pack in. We're not going to ramble on any further. We're going to go straight into the world's first and most popular, as far as I'm told, Tech Leaders Quiz.
You really, really need to get out more.
So yes, here we are, the last edition of You Really, Really Need to Get Out More for this season. This is the quiz, for those of you that haven't watched before, where we do encourage our community of tech leaders to get out more. And by doing so, we actually throw hard cash at it. So this quiz sees the winner walk away with $50 from CTO Academy to go and get out more at a local restaurant that they nominate. Sanjay, we've had contestants so far from around the world: South Africa, UK, US, Canada, Austria. And to be honest, I've been a little underwhelmed. I don't know about your thoughts, Sanjay. I mean, I set out with very high expectations, right? To give our community of brilliant tech leaders almost a shop window to display their polymathic tendencies, and it's just not worked that way.
I think it's people get the questions, and it's like headlights, right? A rabbit in headlights. Yeah.
Well, that's about to change. That's about to change, because today we have a true heavyweight clash of the CTOs. And I was trying to think of, the boxing. You have Thriller in Manila and Rumble in the Jungle. So I came up with a crossfire of wisdom from the United. Which, doesn't quite trip off the tongue. But welcome, Stephen Morris and Andrew Smith. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
After that enormous build-up, there's much to live up to. Andrew, start with you. And our kind of normal intro, really, which the audience tend to love, is just a little bit about where you are, what you're doing, and perhaps challenges, achievements that you're going through at the moment.
So I actually recently changed job. Since I enrolled on CTO Academy, I've switched. So previously I spent about 3 years at a small startup called Prisma, and I should say hi to Mark and the team there, because we're still in contact. But that was sort of working in biotech. And prior to that, I sort of worked in larger companies, and I spent a decade doing sort of SaaS software in clinical trials. But just most recently, in the last 3 months, I've started a new role as head of engineering at another startup called Medicus Health. And there we are trying to launch the first new GP system into the NHS for, I think it's the first new one in 25 years that's entered that market. And my challenge is sort of that I have there are definitely sort of indicative of why no one's entered that market for so long. There's an awful lot of integrations and a lot of stakeholder management. So, we have to integrate with like the 111 service. When you call up 111 and, you are referred to the hospital, that information comes back to your GP. The GP systems have to be able to do prescriptions out and referrals out to hospital systems. And there are other sort of patient-facing services. So if you've got the NHS app, that's dialing in and connecting to your GP system. So there's a whole heap of integrations to be done, all of varying sort of different vintages of technology because of how long they've been around. So lots of, a big, broad technology set to sort of to grapple with, just with the team at the nuts and bolts level. But then you've got all the stakeholders. The NHS is not one it's one organization, but you've got different parts. Each area that you're integrating with sort of is a separate group of people, and they all have there's a very high level of assurance that goes on, like proving that your system you will work, and you have a lot of functional testing that needs to be done and evidence that needs to be provided, and also the non-functional side, and all of it is very well intentioned, but the weight of that, the burden of coming into the market and having all of that to be able to do, that's really my challenge right now. Just sort of navigating that huge pile of evidence that we need to build up as a team across all of this area, let alone the functionality that the system itself provides. Just plugging into the huge NHS behemoth, I think, is it. Longer term, I'm worried about security, but right now it's just can we show everyone who's interested that everything works.
You used this is the most polite I've ever heard anyone say it, but vintage technologies. I'm going to write that one down. That's the most polite I've ever heard that called. So I'm keeping that one.
Yeah, there's some stuff that I thought I would never have, that I thought was done, that was like over, and it's sort of, we're here again. And that actually helped. It's funny as me, I'm working with, most of the team are younger than me, and they're sort of like, this is terrible. This is so like hard, and like, why is it so complicated and weird and strange? And I'm like, this just reminds me of 15 years ago. It's just like, this was just normal. And I'd sort of forgotten, and now I'm remembering it all again. Yeah, it's funny. It's nice to be able to bring that sort of, yes, it's strange and weird, but it's fine. You'll get through it.
How are you finding that, like changing headspace, whether it's like a different technology stack or actually just the different departments, like you personally as a tech leader in that business, are you managing to do the context switching, and are you using any kind of techniques?
I think I think I'm just about managing. It's certainly the first couple of months were overwhelming. There was such a breadth of because I've not worked with in this particular domain before. I sort of worked in health tech and sort of related areas for a long time. But there's always every area is slightly different and new. So yeah, there's a lot. But how am I coping? Just getting really organized and really writing everything down and having I have my Trello board with like everything in it, and just being very purposeful about the organization. And otherwise, I think it would definitely be, and a lot of note taking, right? In those, it's not just like a headline, but it's like, even if I know it's only a week before I come back to it because of all of the context changing, I'm just being kind to myself and taking the time to write the notes. I think that's it. Yeah.
I think that's really good. I really like that. Yeah, it's good advice.
Nice, thank you, Andrew. Stephen, I don't know how many hats you wear, because the last time I spoke to you it was more than one. But yes. Tell us a little bit about your challenges.
So I'm a fractional CTO and technically advisor and a few other roles as well. But I spend most of my time in two businesses. One's called Driven Worldwide. It's an international chauffeur drive company. We tend to drive bankers around the world on financial roadshows, which, great example is, a large airline or something decides they want to raise, $500 million to buy new planes or something. That company will then go to a bank, and that bank will send travelers around the world. So we have to manage that mission critical ground transportation. And obviously you could shove them in an Uber, could shove them in a black taxi, but there's the privacy, there's the meetings and everything that go behind it. So it's kind of making sure that they hit the ground running, and that's their private meeting space. So it's quite a different proposition to sort of taxis. And then the second major hat I wear is for a company called Autonomo, which is autonomous retail. So effectively, equivalent of some of the other brands you'll have seen on the high street, where you can walk in, scan a QR code, put your phone in your pocket, you pick things up, you walk out, and you get charged 30 seconds later. That's a German brand, so I spend quite a lot of my time working with Germany and with India for that team. And that business is a startup, and therefore is growing rapidly. And we're about to start rolling out stores in Germany, which is one of my two challenges, really. We're going from concept store in Hamburg to real stores, real problems, real customers. And the great thing is we do have a real customer now. It's ourselves. So we've eaten our own dog food, as they like to say. But there's a whole host of problems coming our way that we haven't thought of, that are when you extract that to an external customer. So for me, my two major challenges probably are, that's one of them, taking that step forward into a rollout process, which will gather speed and become faster and faster, hopefully. And the second one is to do with my fractional role, but it's very similar to Andrew's problem. It's that context switching. It's probably the first thing everyone asks me is, how do you context switch? It's hard, and I think it's made harder for me by some of my team are in Europe for Driven, and some of my team are in India, so they're all on an earlier time zone. It's trying to juggle and context switch. And I guess for me, the answer to that is I have to actually be more of a CTO and less of a hands-on CTO to make that work, which is what I'm trying to extract myself from doing. I'm trying to not be in as much detail, be more strategic, and then I am drawn into less conversations. So it's actually encouraging the right behavior for once, but it is still quite hard to extract myself from that day-to-day detail sometimes, especially when it's so technical.
That's really interesting. What springs to mind, what I find fascinating and scary, is the fractional side of your two roles, right? Because how do you balance the execution versus the strategy? I guess I don't know if you can do that in like 2 minutes, but I think that's, that blows my mind, right? As a fractional CTO, and how do you balance that?
It's about having the right team around you, I guess. If you haven't got the right team around you, you can't, put it that way. So it's making sure you've got that right team. It's a challenge I'm still trying to overcome, is making sure I give myself a strategy time. And I'm sure we all do it. When there's things that need doing, they're the easy thing to tackle rather than the big strategy where you just need to go out of the room and think for a bit. I'm trying to make sure I give myself some time to do that, and letting other people manage the execution and come back and report on the execution. So one of the things I'm using is the Raki matrix. I'm not sure if that's the right name for it, but to try and help extract myself from some of those conversations and give people the right framework to work in.
Yeah, cool. No, interesting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Well, thanks, Sanjay. And as I say every episode, I really appreciate you coming on board, putting your head above the parapet. I actually met Andrew and Stephen in a pub in London 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I think it might have been that second Guinness that tippled them over into accepting to this quiz. But thank you both very much. And as the audience probably does know, our listener probably does know, this is the world's first and only Tech Leaders Quiz. It's also very low tech. We've tried various things to try and improve the process, guys. But it is first shout gets the option on each question. There are 3 questions, as always. I'm just quickly sorting out my low tech process in front of me here. So, Andrew, bearing in mind that you share a wonderful Christian name with me, I'm going to ask you to choose first: A, B, or C.
Let's go C.
Let's go C. This often happens, Who am I? Which is my favourite one and always tends to come out first. Right. Okay, guys. Are we ready? Good luck. Here we go. Audience is waiting with bated breath. Who am I? Born May 1973, Michigan. American at birth, however, since 2021. Also now a New Zealander. Described as a computer scientist and internet magnate. At Stanford, a research program that he called Backrub focused on the problem of finding out which web page is linked to a given page, which led to the launch of one of the tech giants.
Is it Larry Page?
It is, Andrew.
Oh,
Great answer. Nice. Excellent. Bearing in mind the history of this quiz, we're just delighted for someone to get it right.
I would like to think, Andrew, you did assess our general knowledge in the pub that night, and so you know where we're going.
I realise it's unlikely we're going to get more than one right, so let's celebrate that one straight away. Stephen, we've got B and A left. Which one do you like?
Let's go A, please.
Go A. Okay, here we go. What term is used for the most basic level or core of an operating system, responsible for resource allocation, file management, and was that Stephen?
Kernel.
That was
perfect. Beautiful.
Nice. One all.
I knew we had quality, Sanjay, for this. It's brilliant. All right, this is the decider, guys. I think this is very easy. All right, so I'm gonna throw it out.
No pressure.
Typically considered the successor to dial-up internet access. What was the B term?
Broadband.
For what? Andrew Smith. Well done, sir.
That was quick off the mark as well. Well done.
I took a gamble.
Brilliant. Well, I'm just very excited that we had three correct answers. Thank you both very much indeed. I haven't actually asked you, sorry, and it's terrible to ask the loser what was the restaurant that he was going to nominate, but I forgot to ask you both what you were going to nominate. So perhaps, Andrew, what restaurant will be enjoying the largesse of our prize money?
So there's a small independent Italian restaurant near where I live called Così, and that's where I'm going. That's COZZE.
COZZE. Stephen, I mean, I feel guilty now asking you, and I'm very happy to come and buy you a pizza if there's a. Where were you planning?
I was going to go to one near our office actually, which is called I was actually going to split it because I've got two teams, so I was going to take the tech lead out for both. So one was going to be in India, which I wouldn't be able to name the place because I hadn't decided, and the other one was an Indian restaurant near our office in Charing Cross called the Maharaj of India, which is very nice food.
I know that. Well, perhaps we can have a curry ourselves one day at that restaurant. But thank you both again very much for joining us, and good luck.
Thank you. And well done, Andrew.
Well, Sanjay, I mean, we've left the best for last.
It was amazing.
2-1.
Can you believe it? I cannot believe it. I was actually quite nervous. I'm not going to lie. I was very nervous coming into this quiz.
We finally had a 100% success rate with our quiz, and that's not to denigrate the previous contestants. It's it's a rabbit in the headlights thing. People sometimes perform well and don't perform well, but hats off to Stephen and Andrew for finishing this season in such quiz glory, and $50 will be finding its way to Andrew Smith. But without further ado, we have a special fireside chat, Sanjay, this week.
I'm really looking forward to this. I think this will be lots of fun. For me anyway, it'll be lots of fun.
Well, let's give it a go. Sanjay's fireside chat.
So, final fireside chat of season 1, and look who's with me. It's my co-host, Andrew. I've been really looking forward to this, Andrew. I'm not going to lie. I think it's going to be good fun.
I'm not going to lie either. I'm slightly nervous about this interrogation, Sanjay. But delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I mean, let's tell the audience I'm not just a filler. Although, can I say, on Sanjay's intro notes to me, he said we normally have a cool tech person, but let's go for you.
I'm so glad you referenced that because it's so true. I mean, this is flipped 180 degrees, but we don't need cool every time. What I do think...
Well, thanks for that, Sanjay.
Well, I've had 5 great guests, right? Anyway, I know we flipped the tables. I know you're as opposite to a techie that we could get, Andrew. But I think I'm really hopeful, and I really do think that the audience are going to find this conversation really interesting, because I think getting a different perspective, I know has always helped me. So I think this should be fun. So, like always, I'm just going to dive in and throw some things at you. So the really obvious place that I want to start is so I've probably known you 4 or 5 years. You are a self-proclaimed non-techie, right? So why a startup that helps support tech leaders? Because I love the cause, but I don't get the linkage. So yeah, just explain that to us, please.
Well, it's a great first question. I mean, the truth is, if you'd have said to me, I mean, just as a little bit of background, not only not particularly technical, but never really having been involved in a tech business until quite recently. So my background was family businesses in Cornwall with my father. Then I ended up having a wonderful role in law, but wasn't particularly commercial, certainly wasn't startup. MBA, corporate finance, and then probably only got into tech startups in the last 8 or 9 years. But what that alerted me to was two things, actually. It was the first time I'd ever worked directly, or at least commercially, with very technical people. And two things. First of all, incredibly exciting, because, these were people, with incredible skills who could actually bring, from a non-technical perspective, some of the ideas to life. So I was very, very excited about it. Huge amount of potential. But I also saw, which is really partly where CTO Academy comes from, that being so technical and sometimes not having those softer skills or those leadership skills, or it being outside their comfort zone, really stopped individuals and their stakeholders having the impact they should have had. So when Jason, who's now my co-founder, kind of raised this concept, it was very much his baby, it's certainly his brand name, as an idea. I had seen the issue at the coalface, so to speak. So although it was a very strange kind of route for me to take, I'd seen the problem, and I did feel quite passionately, actually, that being a non-techie slightly gave me an advantage in some ways, not just in terms of working alongside Jace, who is very technical. So we bring different things to the party, but actually, in a strange way, it's been a very, very natural fit. And I'll tell you why, because I don't think you'll find anybody who has as much reverence and respect for their customer base as I do. And it's a hugely privileged position I find myself in, because, every month we launch a new cohort, for example, with the digital MBA. We launch a new cohort, and I kind of research their backgrounds and look into where they've come from and what they're trying to get out of the course. And they're brilliant. They're all incredibly brilliant people who just need some support with that transition from being very technical into taking on those leadership roles. And as you know, it is a hybrid role when you get into a senior leadership role. You have to become business fluent. You have to understand the commercials. So for someone like me with kind of one woodwork O level, give me some sandpaper and I'm a master. But anything else, I struggle with. So for someone like me to be working with people like this and to be helping people like this to achieve what they want is absolutely fantastic. So yes, 5 years ago, would never have anticipated being in anything like this. But it's funny how your life changes and how things emerge. And it's funny, actually, where you can fit in and provide some value to the people that you work with. So that's kind of the short story. I mean, I actually do a lecture in the Digital MBA, Sanjay. Sorry, just to ramble on here. But I actually do a lecture in the Digital MBA that slightly captures my feelings about it, actually, which is called Unleashing the Quiet Genius. Because, Naval Ravikant, who many people will know, he's a kind of a VC over on the West Coast, but he writes a lot of amazing stuff. He talks a lot about the superpower of people who come from a technical perspective getting the business side, because we can't do the opposite way. There's no way I'm ever going to become technical. So if you can combine those two, you can change the world. And that, for someone who can help facilitate that, it's really exciting.
No, I get it. And I think that's what makes it really powerful, right? I think we don't, as techies, we don't know what we don't know. And I think from your perspective, it must be lovely to be able just to guide, these really smart individuals that you're working with every day through a journey that makes them even better than they already are. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that.
100%. And listen, we this isn't supposed to be promoting or fluffing up CTO Academy in any way. However, the fulfillment that we get, and that I personally get, when someone comes back and says this course or that coaching or something that you said in that session has made a difference, really, really fulfilling. And I've certainly never been in a project that I've got that sense of satisfaction from what we do quite so much.
Yeah, really making a difference, right? Yeah,
totally.
I get it.
Yeah.
So for my next question, or it's a series of questions, so bear with me. And I'm going to ask you them all in one go, but I will come back to them if you need, right? So the thing that I find fascinating, and if I was in your shoes, I would really worry about, is that on a daily basis, you are surrounded by individuals that have a real different personality type to yourself, right? And I think that's probably good because that relates to maybe how we as tech leaders feel. So when we're down in the teams and coming up through the trenches, we're with like-minded individuals, and then we hit the exec room or the board room, and we don't get the personalities. So my questions are around that specifically, right? I guess, what have been your biggest challenges with the business, specifically around the personality types, and kind of how have you managed to kind of work them through? Because I think your advice will be really relevant to someone like myself as well. I think the second question, and I think this will resonate to tech founders, right, is how do you stay on mission? Because you probably have a personality type and you're surrounded by different people, but you're on a mission, right? And then my final question, again, just around this is, what do you think you've learned about yourself? Sorry, so 3 big questions.
Crikey. Crikey, I didn't realize it was a therapy session, Sanjay, but thank you. At least I'm getting this for free. Listen, there's so much in there, and I want to try and, we talk about focus and, staying on track. I want to try and stay on track. So please bring me back in if I wander off too far. I've had 2 challenges, I think, in terms of personality and in terms of understanding the other, if I can put it that way. One is with my co-founder, with Jason, who, anybody who's met us, we have these events in London where we're together. I think people are always quite intrigued with the fact we're so different. I mean, we are the yin and yang. And it has its challenges, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think we have learned to understand the other and to understand how the other operates. Jason is typically, really into process, all of those kind of things. I'm typically flying all over the place trying to bring in different ideas. We are a classic opposite pair. So we have had to, and it's not been easy. We've had some real challenges, and you're driving a startup at the same time. You've got all the pressures of, money and where we go, as well as these personality challenges. So patience is the greatest thing, I think. And I think understanding, I've been through a few startups with different co-founders. I think it's so important to get the selection right. It's a bit like a marriage. It really is important because you're going to go through stresses and strains that you cannot predict. So just trying to make sure that you feel comfortable where that person is coming from. The personalities might be very, very different, but if you're both aligned on the mission, if you both trust each other on the mission, you can work through those things. So we've got that. We kind of understand it now, and we understand, one or two occasions we react in a strange way, and you kind of initially might have thought, well, that's very odd, but actually no, that's just the way that individual is coping with.
And has that been a journey to get to where you are? Yeah,
totally. And it's been a journey with a few bumps. There have been moments where both of us have thrown our toys out of the pram, which has gently and quietly receded. It's not such a confrontational scenario now because we understand each other, and it's probably more from me, Sanjay, because as I say, I hadn't worked with technical people in the past. But the other thing that I have found quite amusing, but I've also enjoyed the journey, is actually the customer, our community. Because it's cliche to say that everybody's introverted. They clearly are. There are clearly very different types of people who end up in senior technology roles. But there is a general trend towards people that are more introverted and quiet. And a couple of incidents which might amuse you that I struggled with to begin with. So we've always been a remote first company, so all of our meetings have always been on Zoom, even before COVID came up. And so I used to have 20 or 30 people on the screen, one of our live sessions or one of our webinars, and I'd be chatting away and I'd be trying to get some, and very little coming back, a sea of blank faces. And I'd be sending on Slack to Jason. I think this is a disaster. I think I'm going down very badly with this audience, And anyway, so we'd finished the session and I'd really come away from it, classically just questioning myself. And then I'd start getting these messages coming through saying, loved it, brilliant session, really like that, And they just weren't responding in the way that I respond, and therefore, from my perspective, it was a slightly strange scenario. So that was an early lesson, and now I don't have anything like that anxiety. And I had a dinner, very similar type of scenario, but again, it was a learning curve for me. So I had a dinner with some of our MBA customers quite recently, and again, those the silences around the dinner table make me uncomfortable, but they don't make the guys I was with uncomfortable. So again, it was just learning that I have to fill a gap when there's a gap in conversation. But but the audience didn't necessarily do it. So those were very, very obvious examples of where I've had to learn. I've had to learn that it's not an issue. I've had to learn that people deal with things very differently.
Okay, so thanks for that, Andrew, in terms of your challenges. So with those challenges and running a startup and all the issues that come with a startup, how have you found staying on mission? How have you stayed on course, right? Because for me, your mission is really important, right?
Yeah, and that has been a challenge because I think if I've had a fault personally, and again, this may go back to the character types, it's been a struggle with focus. I've struggled to focus on getting things over the line. I've struggled to focus with execution, which is why I was so excited to get into this community of brilliant tech people who could help me actually push these through. And why working with Jason has been such a positive. So I certainly had to learn that. But the mission actually, Sanjay, has made it easier for me because the mission is very, very simple with CTO Academy is how do we help individuals to get to that next level? How do we address those skills gaps? And from that, how do we allow them to have more of an impact for their stakeholders? So actually, it's been a very, very simple mission. The challenge for us is just getting the product set right, the classic product market fit. What is it that people really value? How can we deliver it? And how, as a business, can we scale it? But actually, the mission and the focus has been relatively simple. It's remained the same from day one. It's how can we help that individual?
That's fantastic. And then the final bit of this question was, what do you think you've learned about you and your personality? And do you think your personality's changed, actually?
I do, I think. I've definitely learned the art of patience, undoubtedly. Patience and actually focus, going back to it, the need to understand how other people operate. My intrigue into how very technical people arrive at solutions, how the process that they go through to understand what the problem is and how they can address it. So undoubtedly, I've learned the art of patience with the audience that I deal with, and I'm far calmer in that sense. As I provided evidence of previous incidents which would have caused a slight anxiety, I'm now far calmer with them than I would have been. So it's definitely changed me, definitely helped me, and yeah, I'm not sure I can add anything else actually subject to that. Sorry.
No. I tell you what's really interesting listening to that is you're saying things how I feel, right? So as a tech leader going into an exec room or the boardroom, I've gone through the same journey, and I think hopefully what's probably nice for our listeners is actually we're all in the same place when you first get promoted into the exec or the senior leadership team. Actually, everyone's in the same place, and it's really nice to hear that from yourself. My third question is, and I'm really glad that we've done this as the closer to season one, is because it's allowed me to reflect on the other guests. And one of the underlying themes that we've had with all the people that have joined me for this conversation is a sense of just being a little bit braver, right? So whatever that's in, trust yourself and be a little bit braver. And it is hard. And that's quite nice, right? It's quite reassuring to have that from all of our guests. I think where you are, Andrew, is you're in a really privileged place. So you're seeing hundreds of CTOs going through this journey, and that must be really rewarding when they get to the end, right? Well, I know it never ends, but when especially if they complete the MBA. But what are the skills that you're seeing that would be really valuable for upcoming tech leaders to really exercise as they start, or even while they're on this journey?
Well, bravery is a really interesting question because, again, I look at it. I come from a very different perspective with that topic. If we're talking about it in a work format, a work scenario, so bravery to me is, I take lots of risks. I've taken lots of risks in business before. I've given up careers that were well paid before. I've done things that are very instinctive, not always with a lot of planning and forethought, which is why not all of them have been successful. But that risk taking is very natural to me, whereas it isn't for the majority of our audience. And for example, the podcast, the quizzes, I love the people that volunteer because most of them are really pushing themselves outside their comfort zone. And previous people who've been on the quiz on this podcast have actually said to me afterwards, that was the first podcast I've ever done. I've never come up, So we are always encouraging people to do that. And because any of us are in or aiming for senior positions where you're making critical decisions on a regular basis, there's an element of bravery just being in those roles, or at least putting yourself in the firing line. So, bravery instinctively comes from showing up. That if you're showing up, if you're making an effort, if you're turning up on these podcasts or these quizzes or in the live sessions or going for these senior roles, and I think because it's always within the prism of our own perspective of what we view as brave or being risky, that to me are all small steps towards moving outside your comfort zone. For example, when I've asked for a couple of volunteers on the quiz, someone said, "I'm not doing that. It'd be career suicide." But it's fine. That's completely understandable. But I think if CTO Academy does prove one thing or provide one thing, it is we provide that opportunity to move outside your comfort zone in whatever scenario it is. And because career growth is almost always attached to personal and professional growth, that in itself means you're always pushing yourself slightly. So the challenge, I think, is in my opinion, is even more acute for those that are aiming for senior technology leadership roles because of that, what I call a handbrake turn. You're turning from a very, very technical background skill set and you're aiming for a role that actually is going to it's going to force you to go outside your comfort zone. And not everybody has the capability or the capacity to become leaders. I mean, there are many days where I think, why do I want to manage anybody? It's really hard. It's really tough. And so I always say to people, you have to feel it inside you. You have to feel that it's that that's where you want to go and where you want to be. And by that very nature, that's going to make you vulnerable. And I raise vulnerability because, we're both huge fans of Brené Brown. I know you're a big admirer of hers, and anybody who's not followed her should definitely look at it in terms of that world of bravery and vulnerability, because she talks about be brave and afraid. There's a combination of things. You're not going to lose that. Whether you call it the imposter syndrome, you're not going to lose it. But vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up, particularly when you can't control the outcome, which I think is, again, really, really interesting for people from a technical perspective, because some of the things that we see regularly are that moving away from perfectionism, that learning the art of delegation, understanding that you have to take risks to move forward and that you have to become vulnerable and you have to show that vulnerability. I think those are really key learning areas for a lot of the people that we work with.
I really love that. And actually, I was listening to some Brené Brown recently, and this reminds me of that conversation. And I think, she talks a lot about showing up, and you've said the same, and it is tough, but I think you're right. If you turn up, it gets easier after that, right? So yeah, I love that. So
it does, and I think the other thing that's really important to remember, and I think is there's definitely a confidence issue for people coming from a technical perspective or from a technical background when they're moving up towards C-suite, that everybody else knows everything or far more than they do. And it's just not the case. Much of it is BS when you get to that senior level. And I think that's a key area. So that sense of vulnerability often comes from, I think you mentioned it, the unknown unknowns. You shouldn't worry about it because most of the people up there are going through the same issues.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think you'll always be scared, but just keep always turning up, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to go into my final question for you, Andrew. So I like my final question, and I asked something very similar to all the guests. So you're no different. And I think it's, the one bit of advice. So the kind of skew on this question is really, you're in a real fortunate position where you're watching so many tech leaders progress their careers, go on a journey, and become great leaders. I think for me, it's, or a lot of people I talk to, it's where do I start? So what's, the one bit of advice that you would give to someone that's, just about to think about this journey, a little bit scared because they're in their comfort zone. But what's the one bit of advice that you would say to someone that wants to do this journey? And what would you say to them?
Gosh, after all I've said to you, you're asking for a classic CEO to nail it in one topic, one item.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start by saying it's a really difficult one to answer, Sanjay. But mainly because what I have found, and I definitely have found in this journey with CTO Academy, is the CTO role itself is so varied. We see people joining us for very, very different reasons. They can be very specific challenges. They can be looking for the insight, the community, whatever. Reassurance. There's a lot of issue with learning at the top. And I think if there was one, and you're looking up at that career ladder and saying, wow, can I make it? It goes back to what I've just said, actually, partly. I think confidence is often a key issue. It is for many of us at different stages of our career. But as I mentioned, it's such a handbrake turn in the skill set when you're moving up towards those senior leadership terms. And I think it does affect people with a technical background more. That doubt creeps in. Am I capable of delivering at the C-suite level? Am I even worthy of a place at the table? I'm sure you've seen this as well, Sanjay, with coaching that you do. I've met some really senior people who are asking those questions on almost a daily basis. So I think the reassurance, the thing I would say is that you are absolutely, you're coming from a technical skill set. You build the skills that you need to get there. Do not be intimidated by who's there or what you think they're expecting of you, and also remember that you're not alone and that's how you feel. Most people are going through that similar journey, and so we go back to that phrase "unknown unknowns," which comes up a lot. All of our members have a superpower, which is their technical skill set, and they just need to have that confidence to say, "Yeah, I'm going to make it," and there's nothing for me to fear when I get there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciate your time chatting to me.
Is the interrogation over?
It's all done. You survived.
You're so gentle with your guests. It's lovely. Thank you, Sanjay. Brilliant.
1 second.
So, Sanjay, it would be unfair of me to suggest that that's been the most interesting fireside chat we've had. But what were your thoughts?
I genuinely think that it's really nice to get the perspective from the dark side, right? In the sense that, some of the emotions that you've gone through, some of the feelings, some of the kind of learning journey that you as a non-techie have gone through, it's really just the same that we technology leaders are going through. So, and I think you said this at the end of our conversation, that actually everyone's in the same place. So being a little bit braver has just become a little bit easier because, we're all in it. I found that really, really interesting. So thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry if I put you on the spot on any of it, but it was very
Not
good.
at all. Thank you for handling these. Thank you for handling these interviews, this fireside chat so beautifully in this season. And, the good news is that you'll be back to a normal, cool tech person.
Yes, cannot wait. Yeah, one a season is grueling enough, Andrew.
All right, listen, our listener is waiting with bated breath to find out what the 80 seconds is all about. Again, it's another slightly different twist on what you might be used to, but here we are, 80 seconds on the wonderful city of Madrid.
Hello, and welcome to this slightly unusual Around the Tech World in 80 Seconds, where I was in discussion with Sanjay about what we should cover for the final episode of Season 1. We've had some wonderful guests, some great cities, Amy in Manchester, Freddie in Medellin, Byron in Cape Town, Juliana Sao Paulo, and Martin in Delft. And so when we were chatting about the city we wanted to cover in episode 6, Sanjay basically said, you love Madrid so much, you talk about it in such positive and give it such positive praise, that why don't you cover Madrid? So here I am. A couple of things I've got to say briefly. Just over there, sadly obscured by the sunshine on this beautiful, bright Friday morning, is the wonderful and very iconic new IE Business School building. And I actually live about 5 minutes away in my apartment. I open my windows every morning. I go, hello, IE Business School. It is a truly fine building for a great business school. And that also sets up the context for the fact that Madrid's a wonderful and very vibrant startup scene, but I am indebted to the Startup Radar Madrid, a report that comes out every year. You can find it online, from which most of the information I'm about to disclose about Madrid has been extracted. So without further ado, I don't have producer James with his 80-second hammer. So I'll try and make it 80 seconds, but around the tech world in approximately 80 seconds, covering Madrid. I think the first thing I'd like to do is just put it into context, certainly in the European context of where Madrid generally sits as a tech centre. You've got the enormous London. Tucked in beneath there, you've got Paris region and Berlin. And then you've got a kind of clutch of European cities, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Barcelona, Madrid, that all kind of play around the 4th to 7th space for most of the reports, apart from a couple of really important areas, which I'm going to cover shortly, and which I think are why Madrid is slightly ahead of those centres, dare I say, ahead of Barcelona, for the controversy I will cause. But here's the thing. Madrid's centre is growing very quickly. It employs roughly 50,000 people in the tech ecosystem, but that has grown by 55% in just 5 years. Why? Well, there definitely has been. It's definitely easier to start a business in Spain and in Madrid than it used to be. The tax environment, regulatory changes have definitely eased. Funding is still a bit of an issue, but we'll come to that in a second. So what are the 3 areas where Madrid is ahead of most of its European competitors? Well, it's second in terms of lifestyle and human capital. I mean, here we are, another beautiful blue sky, allegedly the most blue skies per year of any capital city in the world. I think it ties up with Athens before I offend another city in Europe. But it is a genuinely wonderful city to live in. And also they're second for human capital and third for connectivity, all of which I think makes it ripe for a wonderful startup tech scene. It has struggled with funding and it still remains not particularly well rated for its funding environment, but that is changing. Lots of seed rounds going out recently, Panda Bikes, Quota Rent, even the Vegan Food Club, all the way up, of course, to our local unicorns, some of which I use on a daily basis, like Cabify and Idealista. Deep tech, AI, mobile app, big data, they're the tech startups that are generally getting most of the attention, not any dissimilar to any other tech center. And it's also third in Europe for the amount of academic institutions, workplaces, and accelerators available to startups. So it really is conducive to a startup environment and to anyone who wants to come and work, invest, or build a startup here. How would I capture it in 5 words? Weather, food, lifestyle, connectivity, and community. And there you have it. Madrid. It's a beautiful city.
So there we are, Sanjay. I was paid handsomely by the Madrid Tourist Board to record that. I no doubt we'll be seeing you in Madrid very soon.
I'm coming up. What a great end, right? What a great end to the season. And yeah, I'm booking flights now.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you, sir. You've been a wonderful co-host. Thank you, audience. Season 1 is a wrap, as they say, I think, in Hollywood. We will be back in October, Sanjay, I think, won't we, with a slightly different format, but full of the normal goodies that you've come to expect. Sanjay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
This has been a CTO Academy production with special thanks to our guests, Sanjay Mistry, Stephen Morris, Andrew Smith, the wonderful city of Madrid. Hasta la próxima vez.